The neon lights of Las Vegas shimmered like restless stars, casting ripples of color across the desert night. Yet Amelia felt none of its magic, only a hollow ache that clung to her like a shadow. Draped in an elegant black dress, she sat alone at the polished bar of the Bellagio Hotel, the warm amber glow of crystal chandeliers softening the edges of her grief. In front of her, a Manhattan cocktail gleamed, a deep crimson reminder of nights she once celebrated with laughter, love, and trust. Now, its color burned like an old wound. Just days ago, her life had been charmed, a perfect portrait she thought would never fade. As a rising star in the Paris fashion world, Amelia had won praise from critics and carved her name into the lips of the industry elite. She had a fiancé, Charles Beaumont, a man she believed to be her anchor, and a best friend, Sophia Duval, who had been her mirror and her confidant. But perfection is fragile, and one cruel morning it shattered. The news hit like a blade, and Sophia, together, their wedding already planned. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the erasure of everything she'd built her future upon. Amelia didn't stay to watch the ruins. She packed a single suitcase, left Paris without looking back, and fled to a place where no one would know her name or her story. Las Vegas, city of fleeting decisions, glowing promises, and reinvention became her refuge. She lifted the glass, its scent sharp with bitters and sweet vermouth, when her eyes caught movement in a shadowed corner of the room. A man sat alone, his posture relaxed yet deliberate, as if he belonged to a different world entirely. His fingers turned a glass of whiskey slowly, eyes scanning the room with a predator's calm, calculated, assessing as though every glance told him more than words ever could. Henry Blackwood. The name was whispered in the corridors of high finance. A British businessman, heir to a vast empire, and a man who had made fortunes shift with a single decision. Tonight, however, he was far from the polished boardrooms of London. He too had come to escape. For weeks, his family had pressed him toward a marriage with Alina Cavendish, heiress to an equally powerful fortune. It was the kind of union that could merge empires, but to Henry it was a deal, not a love story. A cage lined with gold was still a cage, and so he had slipped away, searching for something he could not yet name. Now, across the warm hum of the bar, his gaze locked with Amelia's. Her eyes were guarded, yet they carried a depth that drew him in pain, yes, but also defiance. Henry rose, crossing the room with quiet authority. He placed his whiskey on the bar beside her Manhattan and leaned just close enough for his voice to be heard over the muted jazz. "You look like someone searching for something," he said, his tone deep, steady. Then, after a beat, or perhaps running from something. Amelia's lips curved faintly, not in humor, but in an effort to steady herself. She met his gaze, studying the sharp lines of his face, the cool elegance that cloaked an undercurrent of something raw. "And you?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. "What are you looking for here?" Henry took a slow sip of whiskey, his faint smile carrying the weight of secrets. "Perhaps the same thing you are." The warm hum of the Bellagio bar seemed to fade as Henry's words lingered in the air. "I'm not looking for anything," he said quietly, his voice low but unwavering. "Just avoiding the things I'd rather not face." Something about his honesty hit Amelia deeper than she expected. For a moment, they weren't strangers anymore. They were two people standing on the same fragile edge, both carrying wounds the world couldn't see. Their conversation began cautiously, like two people feeling for cracks in a wall. But piece by piece, The bricks came down. Henry spoke about the suffocating grip of his family's expectations, about a life scripted for him before he had a chance to live it. Amelia shared the ache of betrayal, the hollow realization that everything she'd trusted, love, friendship, had been an illusion. As minutes slipped into hours, their words turned lighter. The dim glow of the bar, the soft murmur of jazz, the electric air of Las Vegas, it all wrapped around them until the rest of the world blurred away. Amelia lifted her cocktail, her eyes catching the reflection of the neon lights outside. A playful spark danced in her voice. You know, if we really wanted to forget everything, why not do something crazy? Henry tilted his head, his gaze curious. Like what? She laughed softly, half teasing, half testing her own courage. We could get married. Right now, this is Vegas, after all. She expected a chuckle, maybe a dismissive shake of the head. Instead, Henry set his whiskey down slowly. His expression shifted, less guarded, more intent. All right, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Let's do it. Amelia's breath caught. You're serious? Why not? He replied smoothly. We're both here for a fresh start, aren't we? They didn't think. They didn't plan. They simply stood, left the bar, and let the glittering city sweep them along. The streets pulsed with live music spilling from doorways, laughter. Weaving through the crowds, they found themselves beneath a blinking neon sign. Marry me tonight, inside. The scent of roses and faint incense lingered in the small chapel. An Elvis impersonator in a white suit grinned from behind the altar. Amelia's heart thudded against her ribs as she stood beside Henry, the moment impossibly surreal. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The official asked, his voice warm but expectant. She looked up at Henry, in his eyes. She saw determination and something softer, something that told her this was more than a reckless dare. I do, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind in her chest. Henry took her hand, his grip sure and warm. I do, he answered, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. When they stepped back into the night, the strip blazed in gold and crimson. They paused under the neon, the city roaring around them. Amelia's lips curved into a breathless smile. What did we just do? Henry's eyes glinted with that same unreadable mystery. Perhaps the most reckless decision. He let the words hang, his smile deepening. Or the most right one. Hand in hand, they walked into the electric night, unaware that what began as a wild impulse was about to lead them into a story neither of them could have imagined. Morning sunlight spilled across the room, soft and golden, but it felt almost unreal to Amelia. She sat up slowly, the silky white sheets pooling around her waist, her eyes scanning the elegant hotel suite. Everything was impossibly pristine, crystal chandelier glittering above, polished wood gleaming underfoot, walls dressed in subtle, expensive art. A vase of fresh lilies filled the air with a faint sweetness. It was beautiful, but wrong. She didn't remember booking this room. Her gaze caught movement. Henry, standing near the tall window, a phone pressed to his ear, the sharp lines of his dark suit, the stillness in his posture, the low, measured tone of his voice. It was the kind of presence that belonged to someone used to giving orders, not taking them. She tightened the blanket round her shoulders, her mind flickering with questions she wasn't ready to voice. When he hung up, his expression softened. Instantly, the edges of authority melting into something gentler. He crossed the room and stopped at her side. Good morning, he said quietly, setting his phone down. I didn't want to wake you. I hope you slept well. Amelia hesitated, watching him closely. Where are we? And what's going on? Henry loosened his tie, unbuttoned the top of his shirt, and sat on the edge of the bed. His eyes locked, with her steady, but shadowed with something unspoken. I think it's time you knew the truth, he said. Her pulse kicked up. What truth? He drew in a breath, the kind people take before they change everything. I'm not just another businessman, Amelia. My name is Henry Blackwood, heir to Blackwood, global financial empire that spans Europe and North America. My family controls more than most governments do, and with that comes pressure you can't imagine. The name hit her like a sharp note in the quiet. Blackwood, she'd read it in headlines, heard it whispered in business circles, tied $2 billion deals and scandals that moved markets. And now she was married to it. She stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Henry's smile was faint, almost weary. Because I wanted you to see me. Not my name, not the fortune, not the power, just me. And after last night, his voice trailed, his eyes searching hers, as though waiting to see if she would pull closer, or vanish entirely. Amelia could tell instantly that welcome was more formality than sincerity. Eleanor's handshake was cool, her eyes scanning Amelia with the kind of sharpness that felt like an unspoken interrogation. This is unexpected, Eleanor said smoothly, her smile never touching her eyes. But I suppose life is full of surprises. Henry stepped forward, his voice firm but polite. Mother, Amelia is my wife. I'd appreciate it if she were treated as such. That earned him a faint arch of an eyebrow from Eleanor, silent, but cutting. She turned to lead them deeper into the estate, her heels clicking against marble, floors polished to a mirror shine. The air inside was scented faintly with white orchids and old money. Amelia's heart beat faster with every step. Crystal chandeliers, gold-framed oil paintings, and an expanse of rooms that felt more like a museum than a home surrounded her. Servants moved quietly through the halls, each one pausing with barely concealed curiosity to catch a glimpse of her. She didn't belong here. She could feel it in every glance, every polite nod that lingered too long. Over dinner that evening, the tension only deepened. The long dining table felt more like a battlefield. Henry at one end, Eleanor beside him, and Amelia directly across. Conversation was polite but loaded, with Eleanor asking just enough about Amelia's background to remind her she was an outsider, a fashion designer. Eleanor said delicately, swirling her wine, "How creative. And your family?" "My parents live in France," Amelia replied, keeping her voice steady. "They run a small antiques shop." Eleanor's lips curved into a faint smile that didn't hide her judgment. Charming. Henry's jaw tightened. "Amelia's work is recognized in Paris. She's built something from nothing, something you should respect." Eleanor glanced at her son, her expression unreadable. But Amelia caught the flicker of disapproval. After dinner, when they finally escaped to the privacy of their suite, Amelia sank into the sofa with a sigh. "Your mother doesn't like me." Henry sat beside her, his arm brushing hers. "She doesn't like anyone who challenges her version of the future. She'll come around." Amelia looked at him skeptically. Will she, or will she try to make this as difficult as possible? Henry's gaze darkened, his voice lowering. "If she tries, she'll regret it." Something in the way he said it sent a shiver through Amelia in odd fear. But the realization that Henry was willing to fight for her, even if it meant going against his own family, She didn't know it yet, but this dinner was just the opening. Move in a game far more dangerous than she imagined. Game where loyalty, ambition, and power would be tested in ways neither of them could predict. Henry set the cups down on the coffee table, his gaze locking on hers with quiet intensity. They don't get to define you, Amelia, he said, his voice low but firm. They don't know your heart. They don't know what we've been through. She exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the weight of the evening, the endless cameras, the whispers, the way Eleanor's cold, measuring glances seemed to follow her even in her mind. I knew this wouldn't be easy, Amelia admitted, curling her hands around the warm porcelain cup. But I didn't think it would feel like this. Like I'm constantly performing, proving myself, while everyone's just waiting for me to slip. Henry moved closer, his presence steady, protective. Then let them wait, let them whisper. Every time they doubt you, you'll prove them wrong, not with words, but with the way you live, the way you carry yourself. They can't take that from you. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to lean on his certainty, but the shadows of her past still clawed at the edges of her new life. She hadn't told Henry how often Charles's messages replayed in her mind, not because she missed him, but because each one was a reminder of how quickly trust could crumble, and Sophia, that betrayal still felt like a blade in her back. The tea had gone lukewarm by the time Amelia spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. What if they're right, Henry? What if I can't adapt to your world? Henry reached out, tilting her chin gently so she'd meet his eyes. You're not here to adapt, Amelia. You're here to be yourself. That's why I married you. I've had enough of people who only play a role. I need someone real. And that's you. For the first time in days, her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. You make it sound so simple. It is, Henry said with quiet conviction. But simple doesn't mean easy. Outside, the city hummed under a velvet night sky, its lights glittering like secrets waiting to be uncovered. Inside, Amelia realized she was no longer just fighting for acceptance in Henry's world. She was fighting to protect the fragile, growing bond between them. She didn't know it yet, but the next move from her past was already on its way, and this time, it wouldn't be a phone call or a tabloid headline. It would be something far more personal. Though the preparations were exhausting, they filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Every fabric she touched, every stitch she oversaw felt like a small act of reclaiming herself. From the shadows of doubt, Henry watched quietly from the sidelines, respecting her need for independence, but always ready to step in if she needed him. He arranged discreet security for the event, knowing all too well how unpredictable both the fashion world and his own family's circle could be. As the show date approached, the whispers about Amelia began to shift. Industry insiders, who had once dismissed her as the billionaire's impulsive bride, started to murmur with curiosity about the mysterious young designer making waves in Manhattan. Yet, for every voice of intrigue, there were still skeptics ready to see her fail. On the morning of the show, Amelia stood in the middle of the empty venue, the sunlight streaming through tall glass windows, casting golden patterns across the runway. She ran her fingers along the smooth fabric of the first gown, a flowing piece in shades of sunrise gold, symbolizing new beginnings. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering Eleanor's cold smile, Charles's desperate calls, Sophia's false apologies. All of it had brought her here, to this moment where she would prove not to them. but to herself that she belonged. By evening, the venue pulsed with anticipation. Guests arrived in sleek black cars, photographers' flashes reflecting off crystal champagne flutes. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, laced with speculation about whether Amelia could pull off such an ambitious debut. Backstage, Amelia took one last look at herself in the mirror. Her reflection showed a woman who had endured heartbreak, betrayal, and scrutiny, but was still standing stronger, sharper, and more certain of her worth. Henry slipped in quietly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've already won," he said softly, her lips curved in a faint smile. "Not yet, but I will." When the lights dimmed and the music swelled, Amelia stepped onto the runway not as a socialite clinging to a powerful name, but as a creator, a fighter, and a woman who refused to let her past dictate her future. She didn't notice Charles slipping into the crowd, or Sophia lingering at the back, her eyes scanning the room with something that looked dangerously close to envy. They were here, and their presence promised that the night would not be without its shadows. But Amelia was ready. This time, she wouldn't run. That once held all her dreams now only reminded her of heartbreak. She told Henry how she had walked away from everything she had built, not because she wanted to, but because staying would have crushed her spirit. Henry listened in silence, his gaze never leaving her face. In those quiet moments, Amelia felt something shift between them, a trust that was no longer tentative but solidifying into something deeper. The days leading up to the show were a whirlwind. The venue was transformed into a breathtaking fusion of art and fashion, with soft golden lighting spilling across the runway and delicate floral arrangements lining the aisles. Each gown was a testament to resilience, bold silhouettes, vibrant colors, and intricate detailing that spoke of rebirth after ruin. Yet behind the scenes, tension simmered. Eleanor's cool disapproval was never far, and whispers in the industry hinted that certain guests were attending not to celebrate Amelia's work, but to watch her fail. On the afternoon before the show, Amelia received an anonymous note slipped under her dressing room door. In elegant handwriting, it read, "Some pasts can't be left behind. We'll see you tonight." Her chest tightened. She knew immediately it was about Charles or Sophia, maybe both. The thought of them turning up at her event sent a shiver through her. Henry noticed her pale expression when he stopped by backstage. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharp with concern. Amelia hesitated, then handed him the note. He read it once, then again, his jaw tightening. "They won't ruin this for you," he said quietly but firmly. "Not tonight." That evening, as the first guests arrived, politicians, A-list actors, fashion icons, the air buzzed with anticipation. Amelia could hear the clicking of cameras, the murmur of journalists, the rustle of silk gowns. Somewhere among the crowd, she knew were the two people who had once destroyed her life. But this time, she wasn't the same woman who had walked away in silence. When the lights dimmed and the opening model stepped onto the runway, Amelia took a steadying breath. No matter what happened, she would see this night through. She would not let anyone past or present take this from her again. Amelia froze mid-conversation, the champagne flute in her hand trembling ever so slightly. That voice, smooth, practiced, and dripping with false warmth, was one she had once known better than her own thoughts. Slowly, she turned. There, standing just a few steps away, was Charles Beaumont. He looked almost exactly as she remembered, immaculately tailored suit, perfectly styled hair, and that confident smirk that had once charmed her. But now, all she saw in it was arrogance and betrayal. Her breath caught for a moment, and she felt Henry's hand tighten protectively around hers. "Charles," she said evenly, her voice calm despite the storm rising inside her. He smiled as if nothing had ever happened. "You look different, stronger, maybe. I've been meaning to talk to you." Before Amelia could respond, another figure appeared at Charles's side, Sophia Duval, her best friend once. Now the other half of the betrayal that had shattered Amelia's life. Sophia's smile was polite, but her eyes flickered with something Amelia knew, well-calculated intent. "What a surprise," Sophia said, her tone light but edged. "We didn't expect to see you here, Amelia. Though I suppose the Blackwood name opens quite a few doors." Henry stepped forward slightly, his presence commanding enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "If you have something to say," he said in a low, steady tone, "say it without insinuations." Charles's eyes darted to Henry, then back to Amelia. "We just wanted to clear the air. We made mistakes." "Amelia, but disappearing the way you did, don't you think we deserve at least one conversation?" Her pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel the weight of curious eyes turning toward them, the glittering crowd sensing drama brewing like wolves. Catching the scent of blood, Amelia took a slow breath, squaring her shoulders. "No," she said firmly. "You don't deserve my time, my energy, or my forgiveness. I've built something new without either of you, and I'm not letting the past drag me back." Sophia's polite mask faltered. Charles's smirk tightened. But before either of them could speak, Henry's voice cut in, low but carrying enough force to end the conversation. "Walk away now." The pair hesitated, their pride battling their wounded egos, before finally retreating into the crowd. Amelia exhaled slowly, realizing only then how tightly she'd been holding Henry's hand. He looked down at her with quiet pride. "You didn't just face them, you owned the moment." She gave a faint smile, her heart still pounding, and whispered, "For the first time, I feel free." Amelia settled into the leather chair, her pulse still uneven from the earlier encounter. The study was warm but imposing, lined with towering bookshelves, a crackling fire casting flickers of gold against the deep mahogany walls. Eleanor Blackwood sat across from her, hands folded neatly atop the polished desk, her expression measured but unreadable. "I've always believed," Eleanor began slowly, "that actions speak far louder than words." Her gaze was steady, almost dissecting. "Tonight, I saw something I did not expect from my son, genuine passion in his defense of you. Henry is not a man who gives himself easily." Amelia remained silent, unsure if this was praise, warning, or both. "I'll be candid," Eleanor continued. "When Henry announced your marriage, I assumed it was impulsive, reckless, even. But this evening, I saw that perhaps I underestimated you. You didn't flinch when confronted by those people, whoever they were, and you held your composure with a grace most women in this circle take years to master." Amelia's heart tightened, unsure how to respond. She chose her words carefully. "I didn't come here to win anyone's approval, Mrs. Blackwood. I came because Henry and we've both had our lives turned upside down, and somehow we found each other in the middle of it." Eleanor's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not warm, but no longer cold. "Perhaps that's why you intrigue me, Amelia. But understand this world is not forgiving. Every move you make will be scrutinized, every word twisted. If you mean to stand beside my son, you will need more than love. You will need strength, cunning, and the ability to turn every challenge into an advantage." Amelia met her gaze, something resolute sparking in her chest. "Then I'll learn, and I won't break." For a moment, Eleanor studied her as though measuring the truth of her words. Then, with a slight nod, she gestured toward the door. "Very well, we'll see if you mean it." As Amelia left the study, she could still feel Eleanor's sharp eyes on her back. But instead of fear, there was a flicker of something else inside her determination. Outside, in the hallway, Henry was waiting, leaning casually against the wall. The moment he saw her, his posture straightened. "Everything all right?" Amelia smiled faintly. "Better than I expected." And for the first time that night, she realized Eleanor's words hadn't intimidated her. They had fueled her. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but clear. "Henry, you saw me when I felt invisible. You gave me strength when I thought I had none. You've been my safe place, my challenge, and my greatest surprise. I promise to love you, to believe in you, and to walk with you through every storm." The guests were silent, hanging on every word as the priest bound their vows with a timeless declaration. When Henry and Amelia sealed their promises with a kiss, the late afternoon sun spilled through the stained glass windows, bathing them in warm golden light, as if the castle itself was blessing their union. As they stepped outside, the soft wind carried the scent of roses across the courtyard. The guests erupted into applause, and Henry pulled her close, his lips brushing against her temple. "We made it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Amelia smiled through her tears. "We're just getting started." That evening, the grand halls of the castle filled with music, laughter, and the glow of candlelight. Couples waltzed under the ornate chandeliers, glasses clinked in celebration, and every so often, Amelia caught Henry watching her not with the guarded gaze of a man used to scrutiny, but with the open, unshakable devotion of someone who had found his home in another person. Later, as the festivities softened and the castle grew quieter, Amelia and Henry stood alone on the stone balcony overlooking the moonlit loch. The water shimmered, reflecting the stars above. Henry wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "No matter what challenges come," he whispered, "this will always be my greatest victory." Amelia closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her back. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't scare her. It felt wide open, full of promise, and entirely theirs. ChatGPT said. The castle garden glowed beneath a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, their soft shimmer dancing over the petals of roses and the polished marble pathways. Guests laughed, clinking glasses under the ancient oak trees. But Amelia's attention was pulled to a figure moving toward Helena Blackwood. For months, Helena had been the embodiment of quiet judgment, her every glance measured and guarded. But now, in this serene moment, she reached out and rested a gentle hand on Amelia's shoulder. Her voice, unexpectedly warm, carried a sincerity that made Amelia's breath catch. "I once doubted you," Eleanor said softly, "but now I see why Henry chose you. You've brought light not just to him, but to this entire family. I'm proud to call you my daughter-in-law." Emotion tightened in Amelia's chest. She managed a trembling smile before embracing Helena, the words settling deep into her heart. No public praise, no grand gesture could match the weight of this quiet acceptance. That night, Henry and Amelia swayed together in the center of the garden. Their first dance, as husband and wife, framed by the golden glow of candles and the tender notes of a piano. Around them, the world seemed to blur into a haze of laughter, music, and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. But in Henry's arms, Amelia felt only the steady heartbeat of the man who had become her anchor. A year later, that heartbeat found a new rhythm with the soft coos of a baby girl cradled between them. They named her Lily Elena Blackwood, a name that carried both the grace of Amelia's spirit and the weight of the family legacy she had come to embrace. Henry's eyes glistened as he held his daughter, his pride and joy unhidden. Amelia, now a celebrated figure in the fashion world, poured her soul into a collection she called Rebirth. Each design was a story stitched in fabric tales of betrayal overcome, love rediscovered, and a woman rising from the ashes, stronger than before. There, life was not without challenges. Whispers still rose in high society. Storms still tested their resolve. But through every trial, Amelia and Henry stood hand in hand, learning, growing, and choosing each other over and over again. They had learned that happiness wasn't found in the wealth that surrounded them, nor in the grand halls they called home. It lived in the stolen glances over morning coffee, the late-night laughter in quiet rooms, and the silent promises shared when words felt too small. Sometimes, the most reckless decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. And for Henry and Amelia, love was never about perfection. It was about the courage to build something real, imperfect, and everlasting.